And we are live. So, very welcome back, Elaine. And yeah, welcome to the audience. Thank you all for being here again today. This is her second time on the show, and we're discussing Islam. Elaine, welcome back. Tell us what we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Lloyd. Pleasure to be here. And today we're going to start out talking about Sharia. Can you hear me fine?
Yes?
Okay. Because a lot of people don't even understand exactly what that is. Now, I realize that on your show, because you talk about Sharia a lot, that your regular followers will have a very good idea. But of course, we always have to start at the beginning for those who don't. And then we're going to talk about how it's spreading around the globe. Islam is spreading around the globe, and that means Sharia is spreading around the globe because wherever Islam goes, Sharia goes.
Don't you find that people falsely equate Sharia with the Quran, the stuff in the Quran, as opposed to it is a full-fledged political and legal system, a complete set of legal texts that compete with Western law?
Yes, it is. But um, I really resist making it unnecessarily complicated for people. And I'll tell you something. I haven't gotten to the rest of the list here, but we'll get to it. Is that one day I was watching a interview, and it was Michaela Peterson had invited Muhammad Hijab and Ayahir Hirsi Ali to speak, both of them. And it was incredible the way Muhammad abused Ayaan Hirsi. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. Honestly, if that had been my program, I would have shut it down. And in fact, according to Islamic disputation, you would have been entirely in your rights doing that because there are protocols. And so, but of course, if you don't know there's protocols, then you can't act on them. And it seems she didn't know what to do. And it went on for quite a while. So the good thing that came out of that, though, is that I did a fair amount of research, which would be a good one. And I got this book about Islamic disputation.
Mm-hmm.
And
What is the
in it,
title of
it
that book?
sets out the authorities. Okay, so if you're going to be arguing or debating an issue in regards to Islam, what are the most important authorities? And number one is the Quran, and number two is the Hadith, and after that we have consensus, qiyas, opinions, etc. So
Yeah,
when
but those are the
we look,
sources of the Sharia.
yeah,
And my
so
concern
the
is that people oversimplify it so that they minimize and deflect from the reality of the Sharia so that it's never investigated.
Well, this is done if you need to clarify something, but sometimes it is very clear in the doctrine. So if you look at, for example, the Al Qaeda reader,
Right.
and this is ISIS. This is like reading the Quran. It's very clear what it says, and that's what they go with. So yeah, I was just going to ask if we could share the screen, but I should mention you did
Yeah.
ask me a question. What else were we going to talk about?
Yeah.
So yeah, the Sharia and how that affects like education, social cohesion, human rights globally, future governance, the dualism in Islam,
Yeah.
deception, and then into the three stages of jihad. So, but just to clarify about Sharia to start with, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So go ahead, please. I just wanted to show everyone that it is required within the Sharia that harsh words, which is vile, abusive language, and intimidation are compulsory components of spreading Islam and dealing with people who
That's spreading
disagree.
Islam. Yes, that's not disputation though. So in terms of like an interview with a couple of people who are supposed to be speaking about Islam,
Mm.
that's different. Yeah. So for instance, I have this paper on halal standards because that is one of the topics we're going to get to is Islamic
Mhm.
finance. And what it says is when the primary source does not provide an adequate answer to the question, then you go down the list of what else does, and you get these special sort of decisions And that is very obvious in the case of halal, because if you, now I don't want to get ahead of myself, if you look at halal in the Quran, you know, and this is for Surah 5:5, for example, and it says, you know, good, lawful for you is the food of the people of the book. That's what it says. Now, Surah 5:5 came in Medina, so it's in the later part of Muhammad's, you know, preaching. And what is actually chronologically an earlier verse, okay, it's, I think, 2:173, says that you mustn't have meat that some other, that has been blessed in some other name than Allah. Well, you know, people aren't wandering around blessing meat in factories anymore, okay? So you can't have meat that's been blessed, you know, by other, in some other name than Allah. And you can't have birds of prey or pork, bear, you know, there are some things fairly limited. But then again, we have darura. So necessity applies. And if all there is going to be, you know, say a vegetarian meal or something, for example, you know, for decades people were here and we didn't have halal food. And that really came into force more in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution and Ayatollah, but we haven't got to that yet. Right. So yeah, that's about the order of it. And if we could maybe have a look at my slides for a minute.
Sure, you can just share your screen.
Okay, so there we go, share. Why is it doing that? Oh, there it is. Okay, it wasn't showing that before. We'll start at the beginning. And, you know, because we're talking about its influence on democracy, democracy is considered a system of kufr. And that's a system of the unbelievers. And it's very amenable, actually, to Islam because it tends to be very tolerant. There are a lot of rights, and depending on what you're doing. Is it possible for me to see you and the screen at the same time? That's kind of easier. Or no?
If you look inside, well, if you're in the studio, the studio, you should be able to.
Then I can't. Yeah, then I can't move it. Is that it?
No, if you're inside the StreamYard studio, you should see us on the left and your slides in the middle.
Yeah, right. There they are.
You should see everything.
Okay, yeah, but I can't move it in here. All right, so this is the primary doctrine, and the context is found in the life of Muhammad. Now, that's just to put things in chronological order, because as I was saying earlier, you know, the certain verses, when did they occur, whether it was in Mecca or Medina. So this is the primary doctrine. And then going back here, the order of authority, which I just mentioned. And because it is comprehensive, it is a complete system of governance, socio-political governance with religious aspects. Everything in the civilization is either obligatory, recommended, permitted, discouraged, forbidden, depending on what the doctrine says about it. And if you want to look at how it goes together, Sharia is actually in the Arabic text in the Quran, and it says, "Now we have set for you, O Prophet, on the clear way of faith. So follow it and do not follow the desires of those who don't know the truth." And so we have the Quran, we have the traditions, the stories about Muhammad, and they overlap. And all of this is Sharia. You can take something from the Quran and you can look at something from the Hadith and you can kind of put them together and figure out what was meant by that. But if you actually look at the Quran in the Arabic, there is the word Sharia. And it represents a divinely ordained path of conduct, which is realized by following the example of Muhammad. And here is the word Sharia, an ordained way. So usually when I'm trying to describe what is Sharia for people, I say it is the ordained way of Islam. It is derived from the Quran and Hadith. And of course, all of the decisions and the finer points that are put on it farther down. But that's the order. And this is where we often go to see what some of those finer points are, the decisions that are found in Reliance of the Traveler. And that's that section. So I can stop sharing now. Sorry. Yeah. So did that all make sense?
Yeah, a little fast. You can slow down a bit if you want to take more time to to explain things. Um, yeah. So, but it's a simplification because when in one sense, because when you look at the Sharia, you, for instance, in the Reliance, which is the common text that we all use,
Yeah.
which is the first stop we generally go to. If you want to look at the laws of marriage, I think it's 120 pages
That's
of
right.
very,
Yeah.
very detailed marriage
Exactly.
laws, broken into dozens and dozens of subcategories explaining
Yep.
this and that.
Yep.
So, which you're not going to find in the Quran. It's not laid
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
And you might find it scattered across 2 million hadiths, but here you've got it listed as actual laws, regulations, stipulations, steps to follow. And people don't really, they think it's just the Quran. There's that false equivalent, so that we're trying to imply that no, it's just the Quran, when actually it's a full legal system, because the Imam goes to university, studies for up to 7 years, comes out effectively as a lawyer, a jurist, a legal practitioner. And it's like, well, and then they have courts and they have judges, the equivalent of what we have in the West. And this defines the Islamic civilization and life and all the actions that they take based on the legal system. And if people look at those laws because they're in black and white, because the Quran is very vague, you can find contradictory hadiths and Quran verses. When you look in the
Exactly.
Sharia, it is
Yeah.
very clear, and it
Oh,
shows
yeah.
just how barbaric
I
Islam
know.
actually is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like the example I was just giving from the Quran about, how much does it actually say about halal? It actually says very, very little about halal. But when you look at the halal industry now, some people have called it an invented tradition. And the reason for that is that, right up until, in the 20th century, we did not have this halal industry. But in
Right.
1979, after the revolution in Iran, there was a whole load of meat that arrived in Iran, as it always had. And it had come from the West, probably Brazil. They export a lot of beef. And he said, no, we will no longer accept any meat that has not been killed in a halal fashion. And he took all
Mhm.
that meat and he turned it into fertilizer. And that was the beginning, because now it's gone far beyond that. I mean, we've got, halal fingernail polish, and that's so that people can, wash their hands and the water will also touch the fingernails. Now, did Muhammad imagine that was going to be coming? But when you've got the halal industry displacing other industries, because now you're creating a halal market. And I'll get to that. Actually, I have a very good slide to show that.
And this boosts the halal economy effectively and
Huge,
segregates the money.
huge. Yeah. And yeah, actually, if I could share this slide again, I think I've got it there.
I'm just I went to look at my cell phone to see if my stream on my phone, because I do that sometimes to check.
Mhm.
And this stream is not appearing on my YouTube app on my phone. It's not visible whatsoever. There's nothing under my videos or live streams. It's crazy. It's the craziest thing. As far as my YouTube app is concerned on my phone, I am not streaming whatsoever. So that is the craziest thing. Oh.
Well, that's not good. So do you mean we may not actually be streaming?
No, we're streaming, but my phone is not, my YouTube app on my phone is not showing the stream. It doesn't know it exists.
All right. So what I wanted to say is, like, after, in recent times, the OIC, that's the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, has imported.
You're not sharing your slides?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. All right. Share screen. And okay, allow. Okay, here we are. So the OIC has imported 184 billion in halal food with OIC trade. We have 34 billion. But the interesting bit is the highest halal food expenditure per capita is in European and North American minority countries. So we have Sharia standards that are applied today that take money from the that's easier when I can see you. Okay. That take money that's raised through zakat from these sales. And then we get to this here. All right. And this is, there was a group that I was working with, and this was part of a conversation, a thing we were doing one time. So I can't give you the source for this because it's private, but it's an excellent depiction how it works. So we have a migration, and now you create a market. So now you have a demand for halal, and then there's pressure brought to bear. We want halal food, whether it's in the hospital or the school or at your local butcher. But to do that, you have to get halal certification. Now, certification costs a lot of money, and you have to meet certain standards, and the standards increase all of the time, so that what began with just the meat needs to be a certain way, now we've got investments, for example, in supermarkets that claim here. I'll just show you that. Here we are, ethical investing. And it says that in ever increasing numbers, Canadian investors, and this would include Muslim and non-Muslim, because of the multicultural sort of milieu that is Canada now, and thinking that they're being very noble in doing this. So we have this, it says here, socially responsible and ethical investing based on investments that adhere to Islamic principles, and people don't even know what those principles are. So to go back to this one here, so we've got, companies that are falling all over each other to get halal certification, pay the money for halal certification, and meet all the requirements, because there is this enormous market that they think is very attractive. So you get into halal production. Well, who are you allowed to employ to do some of these jobs? For example, a number of years ago in the EU, with only 5% of the population, 25% of the abattoirs were now Islamic, right? So we, even carbon, okay, that's used as a cleaning agent has it been halal certified? Is the cleaning process certified? Is anything else being produced at that factory that is not halal that might be causing some contamination?
Once they get their foot in the door, they start to...
It just gets more and more and more, right? So, investing in a shopping mall, but now there can't be anything there that contravenes Sharia. Okay, so we don't want any alcohol, we don't want any gambling, and more, the financial market is completely changed to become Islamized. So we've got the sales now, and not only that, food does not need to be marked as being halal. So, for instance, it's well known Kentucky Fried Chicken has recently gone halal, and as have others. But there's profits from all this, and because of the profits, they're paying 2.5% zakat. This is the Islamic tax, and all of these organizations, the banks, the insurance, the halal expos they're having, the largest one in North America is happening in Canada now. They're all contributing to zakat, this Islamic tax. And this tax finances jihad. That's what we saw in this one. All right. The zakat is obligatory, and there are 8 categories. The 7th category is for those fighting in jihad, and you will find it in the Sharia standard book. So while the unbeliever, all right, is, getting the certification, is complying with all of these things, contributing to the sales, purchasing this stuff, often unknowingly, the profits are going into jihad. Some of the profits will go into jihad, which is used against the unbeliever. And any of, the Islamic finance, they have Sharia boards. They have to have Sharia boards that follow Sharia principles. And people don't know what the principles are, and we're going to get
So
to
we're
that.
funding our own demise. We're feeding the dragon.
We are. And what did I have here? Yes, from farm to fork. All right. Labels not required. What's going on in the field? All right. It's just it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. So I'll stop share again. So that's the subject of halal. And Islamic finance. It's enormous. And you've got kids going to school, for example. And I was watching it was some kind of a symposium that was being given for some Muslim students, and their teacher was there, and they had invited a guest to come and speak to them. And he kept saying, well, what about Darura? Because this invited guest, who was an expert in Islamic finance, was saying, no, they have to get student loans through Islamic finance. And of course, that doesn't always turn out so well for them. It can be very risky, and it can end up costing a lot more than a moderate amount of interest being paid. But if it doesn't exist, there will be no pressure from the Islamic community to participate. And why are, non-Islamic governments approving this? Because there really isn't a justification for it. They know there are Sharia boards, just like there's Sharia councils now all over the UK that are allowing, Islamic marriages, or, judging against women in cases of, whether it's divorce or it's inheritance, etc., and they're being badly discriminated against.
Yeah. But you've got moral relativists in government who think that we're all the same, but of course they're hypocrites while they make that claim, because they want to claim that this person's different and that culture is different. And also they feel that Western culture is evil, Western culture has destroyed the world, Western culture is degenerate.
Well, that's the other thing.
And they also feel that they are doing some kind of, for every illegal that comes across the border, and whenever they beg and scrape in front of some person who's got brown skin, they feel that they are doing some kind of penance. It's some kind of religious ritual which gives them some kind of purity and forgiveness. So I think it's a whole toxic soup. It's a whole. I want to show something from some work I did a couple of years back. So I've updated this a little bit in the last couple of years, but when we look at Sharia finance, back in 2017, this was in CNBC, the rise of Islamic banks on Main Street, USA. So that's 7 years ago, going on 8 years ago. A quiet financial revolution going on under the radar of the public eye. And they speak of the rise of Islamic financial institutions, from small community banks to nationwide investment banks and brokerage firms. They're everywhere. Islamic banks that fund terrorism. And there are lobbying groups with close ties to Hillary Clinton and other banks tied to Iran. And these are some very prominent banks. So Islamic banks have become a force to be reckoned with. Their capital grew from $200 billion in 2000. I mean, I make that roughly every month on YouTube, so it's not a lot of money, whereas they then grown to close to, so yeah, it's a small amount of money. I mean, it's the kind of thing we make on YouTube as a norm, So, I mean, you probably make at least, sorry.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we have to keep in mind that Western politicians think in terms of the next election. That is not working for the people. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was listening to a politician the other day saying, some politician had said something that didn't go with the party line. And she said, well, they need to remember that politics is a team sport. Well, that's the party system. It's a team for them. Whatever is benefiting the parties. So pardon my bias here. I'm not saying one party or the other. I'm saying that this system is working very much against the people, because they're thinking in terms of the next 4 years all the time. And Islam does not have that handicap at all. It's patient. It's thinking, okay, we just keep moving forward. 4 years has nothing to do with it. And
so notice,
and yeah.
Go on, please.
I was just going to say that, politicians are thinking, oh, wonderful, I can bring in this deal and this is going to get me brownie points. But in the long term, it's really not a good idea.
Yeah, no, true. and yeah, they're kowtowing to people who really ultimately don't like them very much. But
No,
they
no,
mention
not
here
at all.
$4 trillion. Now, the US GDP last year was about $26 trillion. You're looking at roughly 15% of that. And there are more than 300 banks. And don't forget, this is 2017. 300 banks and 250 mutual funds around the world complying with Islamic principles.
Yeah,
And the largest banks in the US, so total assets, okay, 2.5 trillion. Now, if you look at the combined assets, and the Muslims operate as a unit to a large
exactly.
degree, they operate
Yep.
as a unit. So you might see there's 51 countries, I think you said, in the OIC, and they generally operate hand in glove. And this is a larger number than the largest US bank, so they can compete at that level.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so the top banks hold.
When it comes to finance, they cooperate very, very well.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is financial dawah, this is financial control, and this is just another means of conducting warfare
Yeah,
against the West. And of course,
absolutely.
we know that they've spent billions of dollars,
Mhm.
literally billions of dollars, in the universities in the West to buy, shall we say, loyalty. And
Yeah,
we can see that
that's
with
my
these
next that's my
certain
next slide.
these terror cheerleader groups that are running around London and Paris and New York and Chicago and LA every weekend, defacing monuments and chanting for a particular terrorist group, which we can see what that money has bought them.
Well, let me just share for a moment here. I want to show you. I showed a couple of. I just got to do one thing at a time here.
Yeah. Someone just
Okay,
asked
there we
me.
go.
So, guys, so it is streaming on my phone. I do have it. I found it, but I had to search for the stream. It didn't show up
Oh
on my
yeah, it was
channel.
scary. What's going
No, when I
on?
went to the YouTube app on my phone, it wasn't showing up as a stream on my own channel. But I had to do a YouTube search to find this, which is very weird.
Well, I'm really glad to hear this is happening. Oh dear, there's the phone.
You know?
Not mine. I unplugged this one. So it's important that people know what is it that we're bringing into the schools. All right, look at all the money that's coming into the schools. So what is it bringing? Well, it's instructive. I wish that phone would go away. Yep, there's no way for me to turn it off. Anyway, it yeah, now there's a recording. Anyhow, so if you look at Saudi middle schools and high school textbooks, they've got heretics, and this is a very recent one. The one I showed last time was a little older, but this is from the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and they have definitions, and they say, okay, what are the Saudi school books saying about this now? So
Mhm.
heretics, and that includes Muslims who step outside the line. Like somebody wrote to me just today and was saying, well, there are so many moderate Muslims and then there's extremist Muslims. Well, it's actually the doctrine is not on the side of the moderate Muslim. Let's put it that way. So if you're considered a heretic, like you're say wanting to wear a Western dress, this one little girl ended up dead because of that. Anyway, so if you're too Western, all right, they are especially critical of the Shia and Sufi Muslims for venerating the graves of imams and saints. And the Wahhabis consider these practices the greatest form of polytheism, placing one outside the faith.
That would be false because they've built a mosque over the grave of Muhammad as just one example. And this is then hypocrisy because the Wahhabis are doing this themselves. And the Sufis are the highest echelon of Muslim scholars. They are the top pinnacle of Muslim scholars. The
Yes,
Sufi are not outside the faith. The Sufis guide the faith. They are the elite of the faith.
yes, and there's always a Sufi on staff there at Al Azhar University, but
Well, the
some will
rector is
say,
a
sorry,
Sufi. The previous rector was
yeah,
a
yeah,
Sufi. The
yeah,
ones
yeah.
in charge are Sufis. They have all 7 of the tariqas or the schools of Sufism are represented and taught at. You can qualify as a Sufi at Al Azhar.
Yes. So back to what the question here is, what is being taught in the schools? We got all this money going into the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is being taught? And this is really important to consider because This is, for example, at Georgetown University in the US. And they have a multi-year research project here sponsored by the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center, all right, for Muslim Christian Understanding, it says. Multi-year approach to tell everybody how they are Islamophobic. And I think I mentioned already that our last live stream was taken down on my LinkedIn channel or program, whatever it is, okay, profile. They removed it. Now, this is self-censoring, and it's crazy because you're just trying to explain what Islam is and how it affects different people. And it affects people all around the world. Like you were just saying, you know, Muslims that step out of line, it affects them as well. So what the Bridge website says, okay, who is impacted? Islam is not a who. Islam is a what? It is not a who. And they're conflating the two, Islam and people. And in fact, this is written by a Muslim. Now, recently, the UK has adopted this definition that Islamophobia is rooted in racism. It is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So they're conflating Muslim and Islamophobia, putting those two words together, Islam and Muslim. So if you criticize Islam, is that also being Islamophobic? Well, it would suggest it. And what this Muslim has written is that Islamophobia has been largely promoted by Islamists and jihadists to protect them from scrutiny. This furthers the opportunity for activism because you can't be criticized. And this is the example I wanted to show you was, you know, how this, you know, affects in real life. Now, this chair, and I've removed his name, I don't want to embarrass anybody. Anyway, he had been on the Human Rights Council in Alberta for a number of years, and he was asked, he's a very prominent person in the community, and he was asked to chair the Alberta Human Rights Commission. And immediately, several different Islamic groups, activist groups, went after him, went on the attack. They wanted his job, okay? And he was fired. He fought it, but what did they fire him for? It was a 13-year-old book review where he had written that it is the violent history of Islam, the history that fuels the jihadis of today. Nothing could be more accurate. I mean, well, perhaps, but for that, he lost his job. You know, this is outrageous. This is how people are being censored to an incredible degree, you know, in Canada and elsewhere, how far this is going. But to continue with what the Saudi schools are teaching, and I mean, this is an independent body here. Apostasy is punishable by death. The high school texts endorse this penalty. Shunning, okay, is against non-believers and misguided Muslims. And here the justification for this, of course, is Quran 48:29, that, you know, Muslims must be forceful against the disbelievers and merciful amongst themselves.
Well, that's actually, you can call it, they call it the doctrine of enmity, hatred against the non-Muslim. It's actually part of the Muslim Aqidah or the creed.
Yeah.
Just like, for instance, in Christianity, you've got the Nicene Creed, for instance. Muslims also have a creed, and this teaches hatred to non-Muslims.
Exactly.
So this is a fundamental part of the Muslim creed, to hate, but to not demonstrate that hate.
And this is the highest authority, the Quran. All right. So, you know, you can't say, well, that's extremist. No, this is as normative as it gets. Okay, jihad.
Yeah, look, in theory, the organization that you spoke about earlier, I mean, I'm familiar with them, and to a certain degree, I don't think they're fit for purpose anymore. But also, there's certain views they've taken, certain positions they've taken that are not necessarily fully correct. They might have oversimplified certain ideas, because, I mean, you've got Quran verses that are abrogated by hadiths, which are supposedly secondary revelation. And the Quran also doesn't clarify a number of things. You've got contradictory verses, and these things are clarified by scholars that come hundreds of years later that then define what is correct to believe in what is implemented as part of the Sharia. The Sharia ultimately supersedes everything prior. So the Sharia ultimately supersedes the Quran in
Yes, and
terms
it's
of
the Sharia
implementation and
that is
practice.
expanding and expanding
Mm,
and turning halal into a colossal industry that it wasn't before. I
mm.
mean, that is Sharia in action. So
Yeah.
to carry on with the Saudi textbooks, it says jihad in the textbooks urges violent jihad against non-believers for rejecting Islam, and we see that all the time. Women, it advocates beating women when they disobey and stoning them to death if they have an affair. Gay men are to be stoned to death whether they're married or not. And this is what is taught in the Saudi schools, and this is who is funding our universities. So this is just insane. So yeah, I'll come back to you now. There we go.
Pardon me, I'm just trying to find.
I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at what's happening in the schools and what we're seeing in the streets now. We shouldn't be surprised at all. This has been going on for decades.
Just wanted to mention a couple of things related to what you've said. Muslims will swear high and low that Islam was spread through good intentions, wonderful conversations, and whatever stories about the Prophet. And then of course you can buy this if you like. It's several hundred pages, Atlas of the Islamic Conquest that never
Yeah,
happened,
yeah.
from the Caliphate of Abu Bakr to the height of Ottoman Caliphate. And this book goes on and talks about Muslim conquests, how they defeated this guy, how they defeated that guy, how they defeated the other guy. And it goes on for hundreds of pages with maps as well that talk about these are the different battles. The apostasy wars that never happened, the first phase of the conquest that never happened, the first military expeditions that never happened. Tigris, the Euphrates, canals from the Euphrates, the Khalid's military expeditions. But so you can buy this, but Islam is peaceful and it never indulged in war ever. And then we can go down and there's bunches of
Lloyd,
maps
I
that show
hope
you.
people know when you're being sarcastic because
Sometimes no.
no, sometimes no, Lloyd.
Yeah, no,
Not
this is
everybody's going to
multiple
follow
pages of
that.
wars, battles, conquests, where they attacked the whole world. When Muhammad died, within 5 years of Muhammad's death, the Muslims had invaded 28 countries.
Ah,
They'd
yeah.
invaded Paris. Sorry, they'd nearly reached Paris in the 700s. In the 690s, they were already making skirmishes into France. They had conquered most of Spain in the 600s. Now, I would love a Muslim to tell me, but yeah, that was retaliation for the Spanish invading Saudi Arabia in 652. Because they love to tell us how they just retaliate, but
And
what were
you know
Muslims
what
doing in
you know what
France in the
you
700s?
you know what you've just reminded me of is this book that I showed earlier. And of course, it's talking about reasoning. Okay, how do you reason things, and what are you allowed to argue about? Well, you're not allowed to argue about things that are given, like that women should be wearing a hijab. All right, there are certain people that you should not argue with, and there are certain things that you have to take for granted, basically. And they give this example that when Muhammad died, okay, people say, all right, that Islam it doesn't make sense, and it's an invented sort of thing, and the and that Muhammad wasn't really a prophet, and they say all this, and they say if that was true, then the early Muslims would have rejected it when Muhammad died. Well, hold it. That's what they say. That is the argument. That is the reason given that you can accept without question today that Muhammad was a prophet and Islam is good, is because the early Muslims didn't reject it. My goodness, they were slaughtered in the apostasy wars.
Yep. And they mention this in this book. I mean, there's maps galore, and they mention the apostasy wars, the Ridda wars here. And yeah, so you can see evidence here of these battles that never happened. Wars of conquest that Islam never indulged in. You can
I
see
think
all the countries they invaded. So
Tony's
if you
being sarcastic too here.
so if you guys want, go to my archive, and thank you very much, Lil Domain, for posting the links. I really appreciate that. You can go look up the Atlas, look for the word Atlas in my Google archive, and it's called the Atlas of the Islamic Conquests. and you'll find it and you'll be able to get hold of those. On a second point, you mentioned the money that went into universities. Like this is several years ago. The New York Times even. Why is there so much Saudi money in American universities, from MIT to Northern Kentucky universities? And for instance, if we look at University Dawa, so to the audience, go to the College Foreign Gifts Reporting. Just search for College Foreign Gifts Reporting. This gets updated annually. You'll see here, China has spent in universities, right? This is up to about 2023, 2022. I updated it 2 years ago, maybe. $680 million. What did they do that for? Kazakhstan, $62 million. Kuwait, $66 million. Qatar, $1.2 billion. This is only what we know of, right? We can assume that this is only half. We can assume that the real value is at least double, if not quadruple, right?
Yes.
Because they can easily, if the amount is under 250,000, they don't have to report it. So if they made 1,000 donations of 249,000, that doesn't get recorded. Now notice, everyone says, well, Israel's trying to spend all its money. Israel doesn't have nearly the money of the countries that are floating on oil, like Saudi. Notice here, the top five, just the top 5 Muslim countries have spent over $2.26 billion, which is 42 times more than Israel has spent. And we know that Israel spends money on agriculture, on hydro technology, basically farming. Most of their money goes into farming.
I don't know what the money is.
Hamas terrorist walks on weekends, yes?
Well, I don't know how much money is spent on the media, but we really have to ask a question when you can't believe what's in front of your own eyes. You know, you see Israel, it is one state, all right? Yeah. And you see Islam is now 52, something like that. This money pouring into the universities, but who's the bad guy? It makes no sense whatsoever.
And including China, this is 69.7 times more money than Israel has spent on biotech farming in American universities. And this doesn't even include Western universities in Europe. This is purely America. And they are spending, George Washington University, you mentioned.
I was talking to Georgetown,
$101 million. Israel donated $500,000. This is, I think, hold on, $500,000. 100 million, that's 50 times. I don't know how many times is that? If you divide 100 by, it's what?
20
times more. Yeah. Okay. Well,
maybe it's 200. It's 20 or 200. It's one.
I'm from Africa. I attended a school for emotionally disturbed teachers. Okay. So you know, I don't do so well with the education, but yeah, that's a lot more money, right? $500,000 versus 100 million. Look here, Georgetown University, $378 million that we know of. That is a lot of money.
Yeah, it's 200.
That is a lot of money. So yeah, so these universities are receiving fortunes from these Muslim nations, and you can see it every weekend as they pull down statues and deface Western culture and chant for terrorist organizations. Just thought you might find that. Notice here, Kuwait, Islamic Lobby, University Dawa spend, that's Kuwait, Kazakhstan, Iraq, UAE, Qatar. And then if you compile these together, that line's going to be literally off the page. And this is the Israeli spend here. Yeah. So, I mean, this is insanity. The amount of money. And of course, this was a Muslim professor who spoke out, and he was captured and tortured.
Yeah.
And his family has been threatened. So yeah, just that I'd mention that.
So what was the next thing I was going to move along here to? Let's just have a look here. Social cohesion, human rights globally, and future governance. So let's just have a look at human rights, if you don't mind. I'm just, people think, well, it's terrible what's happening to those women in Afghanistan, but it's Afghanistan and it's only women. Excuse me. I've clicked on the wrong one again. Let's have
Afghanistan, where the women are covered and the sheep are scared.
Yeah.
Well, the men are men and the sheep are.
So here we go. All right. So people know about this. And there's a crisis, a mental health crisis the incidence of suicide is increasing. They're not allowed to be seen in the street anymore without a man. They're not allowed to speak outside the house or even sing in their own home. All right. And I was involved in a chat on LinkedIn, and this very nice young woman, Muslim woman, said, "I hope you understand this has nothing to do with a religion."
Mm-hmm.
And I put the link to this for her so that she would see this is being debated today, right now, okay, in the issue of women's voices. In front of a non-mahram, that means somebody who might be marriageable, like not in front of your brother. It says, many Islamic scholars have debated whether women's voices should be heard publicly. Can you imagine? I can't imagine somebody somewhere who doesn't know me deciding whether or not I can speak. But they think they have the right to do this, to sit and have a little discussion. Should those women be allowed to speak? I wonder. And if so, under what circumstances? Some scholars believe that women's voices should never be heard in public. Never, never, never. While others think it's permissible under certain conditions. They cite hadiths, okay, right there at the top of the food chain, that suggest women's voices can be a source of temptation and fitna. Now, fitna has several meanings. You can have fitna in a country by causing chaos. You can have fitna, sexual fitna, which is some disturbance, all right? You're feeling a little lustful, that's considered fitna. But it's not just women. This is Iraq. This boy was beheaded for playing music, Western music. And just a couple of weeks ago, someone in Afghanistan posted, well, somebody in Iran, I think, posted for them, a young boy who had lost his fingers for playing guitar. What's the justification? Okay, I took this one from Reliance of the Traveler, the book of Sharia that you were showing. Allah ordered me to do away with musical instruments, flutes, strings, crucifixes in the affair of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, which I actually wanted to have a look at that. Pre-Islamic, when is that? Because after our last talk, one of my connections said, what about, where is it? Okay, I've got it there somewhere.
Just by the way, the claim that the Jahiliyyah is the period of ignorance before Islam is false.
That's
Correctly
right.
speaking, it is actually the condition of ignorance. In other words, if you're not a Muslim, you are in the Jahiliyyah and you are suffering from that ignorance. So it's the condition of ignorance, not the period, because we are living in the Jahiliyyah right now if you're not a Muslim.
So he sent me this and he said, you know, it says there's no compulsion in religion, right? And this is from the Quran. But we're going to get into dualism in the Quran, what you hear in the public square and what you hear behind closed doors or say in an Islamic country. Mm-hmm. So he says, you know, it says that. But if you look up the tafsir, okay, that's the commentary, then, and Ibn Kathir is a highly respected one from very early on. And he talks about this. And he says, it was reported the Ansar, that's the helpers when Muhammad went to Medina, were behind the reason. But this is before Islam, right? So this is from the period of ignorance. And then if you look up the hadith, it says the same thing. This is from the tafsir, okay, the commentary on the Quran. But if you go to the hadith, which is the other, you know, top authority, it's the same thing. Now, I didn't add that. That's in the hadith. In pre-Islamic days, let there be no compulsion in religion. But this is what you hear in the street all the time. So to go back to, so he had brought that.
Well, that's an abrogated verse. I mean, that's an abrogated verse.
Exactly. So it's been superseded by something more horrendous later on, and that tends to be the case, you know, as you can see here. This is a person who's just been playing some Western music. So it isn't just women. Of course, you know, it's heavily weighted against women. but young men too, especially, if they're not wanting to enforce Sharia on people, more gentle souls, let's say, not authoritarian types, that's what can happen to them. So this isn't just happening in Islamic countries, though. Now, this here is Nigeria. A man who was stabbed for eating during a Ramadan fast. And you think, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, but it does. This is a Hindu man, and this was in Pakistan. There was another Hindu man, and I think that was actually, I didn't have time to find it this morning. I think that one was actually in India. He was killed. His restaurant was open. It might have been Pakistan. He was dragged into the street and killed because the restaurant was open during Ramadan. And this is a German classroom where there were 3 Muslim children who were supposed to be observing Ramadan. And of course, they're 10 years old. And at that point, they're not supposed to drink. They're supposed to pray. They follow. But the whole class was required to do this. And this is Germany, a girl who was followed down the street, couple girls, by this man
Iranian, I
screaming
believe,
at
yeah.
them to put the hijab on. And this one here were 3 women who were attacked in broad daylight for not wearing a hijab. And this is in the UK. And they were smashed around. And this is happening here in Canada. This, you see, was financed by the Canadian government and Laurier University. A federal voting guide. This is illegal. Any child in Canada should know this is illegal. This is election interference financed by the government and the university. And it went to court afterwards, of course, but then the damage is already done. This is how you should be voting. So I'll come back to you and stop sharing again. There we go.
Just on this point, for the audience, just so you're aware, just like we have the Great Commission within Christian doctrine, which is to go forth and spread the gospel and convert people. I can't remember the correct term right now, just the quote from the Bible, but you have the Great Commission, right? Go forth and spread the gospel, or go forth and convert people in the name of Jesus, whatever that was. That's the Great Commission within Christianity. Islam has a primary doctrine as well. And this doctrine is called commanding the right and forbidding the wrong, or promoting virtue and preventing whatever. They'll find lovely ways of phrasing it or disguising it. But it's generally called commanding the right being the Sharia, and forbidding the wrong being anything that you're doing. Yeah. So, and they discuss here how to deal with this. Now, Sharia is not just for Muslims. Sharia applies to the whole world, and Muslims must impose it upon you if they can. Now, there's a whole series of questions that they've got to ask themselves. There's a formula they must apply on whether or not there'll be backlash, whether or not there'll be punishment, etc. But if they can, they are required to enforce the Sharia one way or another. So they mentioned here that the Muslim has to know, right, that someone is doing wrong, and that they have to take action, be this a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or anyone else. So they must have some knowledge of the Sharia. That means they must not be completely ignorant. 2, they must explain that something is wrong. 3, they must forbid the act verbally. Don't do that, right? And then they must censor with harsh words. Now, when you go into the detail, and I've covered this multiple times on my channel in other discussions on Sharia, censoring with harsh words means using a vile, abusive language, swearing at them, telling them that they're the son of a whore, telling them that, etc. Think of the harsh language that you've heard from the left, right? That kind of whatever vile, disgusting language works. Islam says you're good to go. So brush up on your vocabulary of swearing and go out there and serve Allah. Righting the wrong by hand. Now, what could they mean by righting the wrong by hand? Then notice you can right the wrong by hand, then you use intimidation. Now, logically speaking, intimidation comes before you start laying hands on people. Now, when I'm saying they lay hands on people, I'm not saying that they're praying for you. It's okay. And then notice intimidation, then assault, and then force of arms. Assault means you're allowed to break things. You're allowed to damage people too. And then force of arms means weapons and getting a whole bunch of your friends. Now, I should also let everyone know who's reading this. This is the holy activity within Islam, which includes using arms to cause people harm, serious harm, which might even unalive them, as people say on YouTube. But also notice this list is optional. You don't have to go step 1, step 2, step 3, you can start right here and never use the other steps. So this is Islam. It teaches, as part of its holy actions in enforcing the good being the Sharia, that to do good you might have to use some assault.
Yeah, and reason need not apply because that's all been decided for you.
Yeah, and this is true. Sharia is one reason for the hijrah, to implement it. This is why they go on the hijrah. The hijrah is immigration or Muslim migration, and it is incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. And
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Well, that's the other thing. But it depends on how you address it. And this is what is particularly aggravating, is that right now this new definition that's been adopted in the US calls it racism. It's a type of racism. But when they want you to try on the hijab in school, now it's culture. It's enforced as governance, but when they want it in a school, they call it culture. And why? Well, because you're supposed to remove religion from schools in Canada in 1962. And I think I was saying last week, if somebody went in there and started hanging crucifixes around people's heads, there would be an enormous outcry, but it's all right to put a hijab on them. So sometimes it's race, sometimes it's culture, and sometimes it's religion. So if you want halal food, now it's religion. So it's a Shyamalan. It gets to be all of the
chameleon.
You know, I did that last week too, didn't I? Chameleon, or the time
Yeah.
before. Your pronunciation's better than mine. Especially your Arabic pronunciation. But anyway, so it's whatever you want to be. And now we're getting into the subject of dualism. Actually, maybe we could move into that. Do you want to talk about dualism a bit now?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we'll go over and have a look at dualism. I think that's the next one. Yeah, that's actually what I was bringing up there, is that you hear one thing, but when you look into it a little further, it's actually something else. And there's a number of ways of doing this, but deception is absolutely okay. And I'll give a few examples of that. So from Reliance of the Traveler that we were looking at, the book of Sharia, scholars say there's no harm in giving a misleading impression if it is required by an interest countenanced by sacred law, meaning Sharia. That outright lying is permissible in 3 cases: war, settling disagreements, and a man talking to his wife or she with him. So you can lie to your spouse.
So do we agree with Muslims on theological issues or legal issues or moral issues? No, we do not. So thus they are legally obligated to lie to us. To settle these disagreements.
Yeah. So this is when we're getting into the social cohesion. And that's up to a point until there's more strength. All right. And we'll get to that. But yes, it is important. You can omit important information to give an erroneous impression, which I've seen happen many times, but then I tend to recognize it when I see it. And a lot of people don't, of course. So it's permissible to lie when the goal is permissible, and obligatory if the goal is obligatory. So there are the different types of deception. The most common ones: taqiyya is an outright lie. Sharia is to mislead. Kitman is to just leave something out. That's very, very convenient and happens a lot. And maruna, to suspend Sharia temporarily, like to pretend that you don't have anything to do with Islam at all.
Can I mention something? Taqiyya, just go back to that list, please. Just go back to that list. There's actually a number of others you can add to the list. However, taqiyya also has another definition. It is tactical deception for the purposes of spreading Islam, or tactical deceit for the purposes of spreading Islam. So it has another meaning, which is actually taken from warfare. And so it's not just to lie. It's a very cleverly planned, deliberate lie for specific goal, to achieve a particular goal. So it's not accidental lying. It is very much premeditated.
I don't know if it's really appropriate to say here. I may not, because it's only a suspicion. So that's a caveat there. Everybody understand. I get suspicious about things sometimes. And that is when you look back at the common word, asking for dialogue between the Catholic Church and the number of Islamic scholars when that occurred. I think that was back around 2007 or something. I don't have it right in front of me. But it was followed the next year. It was signed by like 39 scholars. The next year, there was a follow-up, and it was signed by 139 scholars, and saying how we need to have dialogue. But when you read that document throughout, you're seeing a lot of this going on. All right. And anniversaries are so very important, whether it's, Kaibar or, whatever. This was given to the church on the anniversary of the Battle of Badr. And I thought, well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem what you would call very sincere,
Yeah.
So
also to mention, sorry, go on. Yeah.
I was going to get into the talk about jihad now, but
let me just mention one thing also.
Yeah.
Muslims will very quickly tell you, but taqiyya is a Shia phenomenon. It's something the Shias do. The Shia gave it the name. While this is true, it's also false. They're also deceiving you, because if you read through the Sunni textbooks, the term taqiyya has become the norm even within Sunni Islam. Now, within Sunni Islam, the same practice exists, exactly the same practice as they claim exists for the Shia. It is called muddarat in Sunni Islam. So the Shias called it taqiyya, the Sunnis called it muddarat. However, everyone just commonly uses the term taqiyya, whether they're Shia or Sunni. So don't let them fool you. But this is premeditated lying to achieve specific goals to advance Islam.
Oh, yes. And the reason they give that the Shia are such liars is because they were outnumbered.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go on to the next one here. All right. So this is when Islam is weak, and there's a message of peace. And we've heard lots of those, like the one I was just showing: to you is your religion, to me is mine, and no problem. So this is when we have the dialogue and dawah events, like I was just describing with the church, where all these people get together and they talk about how wonderful their faith is and how much it means to them, and how lovely all that is. And then the influential people. Now, when Muhammad died, he gave a couple of orders. And one of them was to clear all the infidels out of the Arabian Peninsula. And the other was to continue giving gifts to the diplomats, to the foreign diplomats, as you have seen me doing. All right. He knew then, all right, the buying influence is very helpful. And whether you're buying it at a school or anywhere else, influential people are given a message of peace. And you often see that they are cultivated, that, everything is given to them. They believe it's wonderful, and it's very hard to speak with those people, because they are the very first person to call you an Islamophobe if you try to be critical of Islam in any way. And I'll give you an example of it. Ooh, that one plays, but we won't play it. It says, so this is the public square. Okay, so this is peaceful. This is quite a few years ago in Vienna. And this imam is saying, as our faith commands, we preach tolerance, love, and measure our behavior against the exemplary life of our prophet. This is doublespeak. So I look at this and I know full well they're preaching one thing, but their behavior they measure against Muhammad. And that's entirely different. Muhammad went to Medina as a supplicant, and within 5 years, there were no Jews left. All three tribes gone.
Right.
you know?
And so this claim of the, I just want to bring up mine here quickly, just this reference. Muslims love to quote, I think it's Quran 2:256, that
Yep.
to you is your religion and me is mine,
Yep.
and those other verses, a couple of verses.
Yeah, there's
Those
two.
verses are abrogated by 385. Whoever desires other than Islam as religion, never will it be accepted from him, and he will be among the losers in the hereafter. So those were abrogated by this verse. So if you desire a religion other than submission to Allah, Muslims will never accept it from you. So do understand, Muslims are lying because the Quran contradicts itself constantly. If you go into the Sharia itself, it clarifies that this is the position and it explains it. All other religions are, that Judaism and Christianity are remnant cults that are left over. These are religions that are void, that are cancelled, that are unacceptable to Allah, and these are the bitter people that will refuse to submit in their arrogance to Allah. And yeah, Allah does not listen to their prayers. Allah does not regard them. Allah does not hear them. As far as Allah is concerned, they don't exist. So just so you know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that, I like to make it simple for people, and especially for our politicians, is that they do not need to know all the details, all right? Because you can spend the rest of your life arguing about how many angels can balance on the head of a pin, and people do. They spend years going over little details of things that are never going, it's not going to help anybody in Afghanistan or Iraq or Germany or anywhere else. So the thing that our leaders need to understand is that Sharia is the antithesis of the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That's all they need to know. And, stop with the foreign funding, stop with the grants, stop with all that, stop allowing things that have Sharia boards and councils. This is crazy. This is a parallel legal system. This is a system of governance that, like with the US Constitution, yes, there's freedom of religion, but there is no system of governance that is allowed to supersede the US government. There isn't. But that is exactly what's happening under the cover of something else. So here's another example of dualism. And this is, treaties can be signed to gather strength, as in the conquest of Mecca. Now, I'll tell you that Surah 9, verse 1, okay, chapter 9, verse 1 of the Quran, clearly says freedom from all obligation in regards to treaties with unbelievers, okay, is for you. You have no obligation to those things. Sometimes they're convenient. And after this, this was over Israel, and Yasser Arafat was in Egypt, and he had signed an agreement, and there was some kickback that no, he shouldn't have signed that. And he said, I see this agreement as being no more than the agreement signed between the Prophet Muhammad and Quraysh in Mecca. So all of, the people who follow Islam would have understood this very clearly, because that agreement was a 10-year agreement. And after 2 years, the time was right. And so Muhammad found a reason to dish that agreement and go ahead and go back to Mecca and conquer it. So, and people say, well, there wasn't any blood. Well, they arrived completely armed. You can read about the armaments they were carrying, and by then the reputation was such that the people in Mecca were terrified, and they simply submitted. A few were killed, but not too many. It wasn't necessary at that point because there was such a force.
Would you say there was a disagreement between Muhammad and that particular group? So, because Muhammad only allowed
He'd already cursed
lying.
all their ancestors.
Yeah, but because Muhammad only allowed lying to settle disagreements, right? So, therefore, if there's a disagreement between you and a Muslim, they are legally allowed to lie. In fact, they are obligated to lie under those circumstances. And we are in a permanent state of disagreement. They don't believe that we disagree on the deity of Christ. We disagree about the Trinity. We disagree about dietary laws. We disagree about how to treat women, etc., etc. So they are legally obligated to lie permanently because we have permanent disagreements.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and I don't want to throw everybody into that basket, because we know that there are people there are many Muslims who do not know their own doctrine very well. They really don't. You know, they'll tell you that Muhammad only had 4 wives and things like that, and they really believe it. They'll tell you Aisha was 18 years old, and they just but enough do, and those are the powerful. So and so this is phase 1 of jihad. All right, message of peace, just like and that's the thing. It's not like somebody says, oh, we're going to have 3 phases of jihad, let's do that, 1, 2, 3, and they're all, you know, carefully, you know, strategized. All that is necessary to have 3 stages of jihad is to follow Muhammad. That's all. Okay, follow the example of Muhammad and you got it. All right, so that's stage 1. Stage 2 we now look at as the demands. And that's what happened with Muhammad. Okay, we had the Charter of Medina. You're going to do this, I'm going to do that. The rules start to come, right? And this is Canada. The National Canadian Council of Muslims has got a lot of political sway. They're a very powerful activist group. They're sending material to the schools all the time. They're one of the groups that went after that human rights chair that I was speaking about earlier. And they get piles of money from unions as well, because they have this green square campaign every year, and the politicians all wear their little green square. The schools all make little green squares. This is to show support and be against Islamophobia. And the unions all wear their little green squares, and they do the same thing, and the members contribute money, okay? So this happens every year. It was so successful, they exported it to Australia. But they have we have a special Islamophobia representative to the federal government. That should never happen. There is a liberal Muslim caucus. That should never happen. There's a 2019 Muslim voting guide. That should never happen. And the universities, of course, taking a lot of funding. And stage 2, we become defensive. Okay, so it's like saying, oh, well, we've got Islamophobia, we're defending ourselves against it. But the mosque from time immemorial has been used for planning jihad, for storing arms, for carrying out sentences, for all sorts of things besides what you would typically expect in a mosque. And that's one example of it. And this is scenes from the Battle of Gallipoli being carried out in a mosque. And I should give you a break. I've got more on section 2, but you know, you probably have something you want to say by now.
No. It's just to address this question or comment from Cargo Crew. It says, because of modern comforts and policing, and because they're interconnected with livelihoods, it's very hard for the average Muslim to be an extremist. I would question that statement very strongly. The Muslims are allowed to lie to get along, so as not to bring attention to them until they're ready to hatch their plan or to act upon it. Muslims are allowed to violate every single Islamic law simply for the case of keeping the peace until they're in a position to impose the Sharia. And this doesn't incur any penalty. In fact, it is following doctrine. So you're allowed to do the exact opposite of whatever Islam teaches and still be a perfectly good Muslim following doctrine. You're simply following rukhsa, not azima, not strict.
Well, and you know, I want to mention the pressure of the Ummah. The Islamic community is so powerful. Now, this group here, for example, is constantly going on letter writing campaigns. So, for example, the Quebec government doesn't want religious, what they call religious apparel in their schools. So the Quebec government, one of 10 Canadian provinces, actually says, no, we don't want the hijab in the schools. So this organization starts a letter writing campaign. And the Ummah will pressure people, write this letter to the government, okay, complaining that these poor girls aren't allowed to wear the hijab in Quebec. And they do. And they think they're doing something good, you know, and this is just an average person. This is not an extreme person. This is somebody who thinks they're doing something kind.
But also on top of that, if they're isolated individuals, there's a likelihood they may be absorbed culturally into the West. However, because there's no backlash against them doing so. However, once you have enough of them in a neighborhood, they stop integrating, they stop learning English, they start forcing their own cultural traditions and norms, religious norms upon the group. They are tribal. These are tribal people. And I think Westerners don't have enough experience with the third world mind and with the tribal mind. They think in Western terms and they don't think in terms of how the third world thinks, which is something I am familiar with. And these people are also then funded by outside groups, and to retain their funding and their prestige and position, they then have to start enforcing the Sharia. And they will now look in the UK, for instance, a mob of 200 people surrounds a police station and threatens violence if they don't release Muslims that cause extreme violence, and so on and so on. You're seeing this. So these, once they've achieved sufficient critical mass, they will then start to implement the Sharia through that escalating stages you saw there in commanding the right. So this is when you look at one, and also this doesn't take into account how these Muslims are in their home countries. They might behave one way here right now, but you've got to understand that culture has not changed, and they're fitting in right now. But you don't know. Also, you don't know if they are simply pretending for now. So,
well, you have absolutely no hope of changing the law in an Islamic country. No hope at all. But in a Western country, you certainly do. And our laws are not equipped to address this at all. Our laws are weak about things like slavery. And it would be very easy to change our laws, frankly. And it's already happening. Like I say, we've got a liberal Muslim caucus. And that's clearly been happening in the UK when they use the Arbitration Act to allow Sharia councils. So we really have to all know, and that is why I'm always, talking about education. We have to know what it is so that we know to say no.
I mean, this might be harsh. This might, I have discussions at work. I mean, so I'm in Poland. I live in Poland, in Warsaw, and it's the capital. And I have these discussions with sometimes very liberal, Europeans, and they'll ask questions sometimes, and I'll tell them, well, on a scale from 1 to 10, Black people are taught to hate you. And generally speaking, you can feel safe in assuming that Black people hate you. And I said, they don't dislike you. They don't have a general feeling of discomfort. No, they actively hate you, and they believe that you cause all the problems in their life. And I'll say, I know you grew up in Denmark, which never had a slave trade, but that doesn't matter. Are you white? You're the problem. It's as simple as that. And I'll say, now look, not every single Black person on the face of the planet believes that, but I'll say plenty do. And the reigning ideology is that ideology, and enough of them do to make your life miserable. And the nice guys, the nice people, are generally irrelevant, although they will hold the nice ones up aloft to say, hey, look at this nice, how can you be so nasty to this nice person? Yeah, but he's not the one that's running the show. So you are being confused by these nice examples that are actually not the facts. So generally speaking, sad as this might seem, as controversial as this may seem, Muslims might be nice people, and that's true. I know some great Muslim people, fantastic Muslim people. Islamic ideology teaches lying, and you should assume you're being lied to, because that's what the doctrine teaches. The doctrine mandates lying as an obligatory duty. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm. It's the education. It's like I was saying, what does the Saudi school book teach? Well, right now people are being told, they're being taught to hate their own countries. And like you say, the whole idea of a white culture or white people, white anything is, we saw a little video yesterday. It was supposed to be humorous, and they had white men at the very bottom of the totem pole in terms of victimology. You get 0 points, all right? But my goodness, there were so many white slaves enslaved by, Islam. It's like the enormous slave markets, and that's not ending anytime soon. Now, like I was saying last time, you can read this book about 1850 and the woman from the UK going to Cairo, and there were white slaves all over the place looking after them, from Ireland and every place else. But you never hear about that. So this slave here, he was from Iceland, okay? And in a letter written in Barbary, so we're talking about the Barbary pirates, okay? And it says, there's a great deal of difference here between masters. Some captive slaves get good, gentle, or in between masters, but some unfortunates find themselves with savage, cruel, hard-hearted tyrants who never stopped treating them badly and who forced them to labor and toil with scanty clothing, little food, bound in iron fetters from morning till night. Now, like you were saying last time, this was the slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade for 82 years, and it was stopped by the British. For Islam, it is still going on today.
Yeah.
It's like, wake up. This is Iraq. All right, 6,000 young women captured, and it's slavery has not gone away at all. So I got off topic there, going to slavery.
Yeah.
So we'll just go
Yeah.
back to
So
that
just
one.
a last point. I mean, people would be shocked by the discussions I would have with my peer group. Things that they would say to me because of my complexion that they wouldn't say to the to the non dark complexion people. So when those guys left the room, the conversation would switch, and you would be surprised and shocked at how often that conversation would switch 180 degrees in moments. So when the white people walk out the door, the black people start saying things that you'd be shocked by. I've been in those conversations many times. So don't assume that the guy's nice to your face, that he's nice when you're not there, when you turn your back. Honestly, I'm saying this as someone I come from a mixed family. I've got family that looks like Elaine, and I've got family that, blonde hair and blue eyes, and I've got family that looks like me. So, and this is not to say that every one of us, but we don't hold that sort of cultural authority. Those negative stereotypes are real, and they're effectively undermining the West. So this doesn't mean you have to hate everyone, but you need to be skeptical. You can't be, we're all the same, we all love each other. No, you need to be highly skeptical, and you need to put your interests first. You need to be very careful. Any comment on that, Elaine, or shall we just move to the
Well,
next
you
one?
reminded me of this. Now, I was speaking of fitna earlier, and it can be, lust, or it can be chaos in a country. And I've got a couple examples of that, but I'll start with this one because this woman is from Pakistan and she's come to Canada. And as you were mentioning last time about all of these churches being burned in Canada, over some radar that has never been released, it's never been verified. Millions of dollars were given for that to happen. It's never happened. But in the meantime, well over 100 churches have been burned and vandalized. And this woman from Pakistan became the executive director of the BC Civil Liberties Association. And what did she say to the churches being burned? She said, burn it all down, right? Now, this woman has been like an activist with Native people in this country, okay, people who are indigent to Canada. And she has been making fitna, okay, causing chaos, upset, all right. And here she is with some Native people saying, we are gathered here on land stolen by the Canadian colonialist terror state, Canada and Israel, our settler colonial projects. We want the land back from Turtle Island, meaning North America, to Palestine. Come on. She's come here from Pakistan, calling us everything under the sun. And I'm not
Deport.
saying this woman is in any way typical. She's managed to get a position, though, at the BC Civil Liberties Association, the sort of association that calls me an Islamophobe when I just want people to stop being hurt, right? She praised Hamas for its attack on Israel.
Yeah.
And,
No, that's shocking. And that person should be deported. They should be named, shamed, and deported. But of course, look, this is something that you might find interesting. So the world's most and least racially tolerant countries, the most racially tolerant, the least racist cultures on the planet are white people. British, Western, Christian culture is the least racist culture on the entire planet. Which is the most racist country in the world? Well, that'll be those nice people from India, right? And and then of course you'll see these countries, Saudi Arabia, okay, you'll see Egypt, not very tolerant. These are people that don't want foreigners, they don't like foreigners, etc. So notice You've got some
Well, we have to say though, you know, who are they intolerant of? Because the Hindus have been, I find that like the Balkan states are much better informed. The Hindus in, recent memory have been
Mhm.
slaughtered. Look at Bangladesh right now.
Yeah, the
So
Muslims, yeah.
if they're alarmed at foreigners, it's really
Yeah.
no
But then you
surprise.
must understand that the caste system is inherent. I've been to India a few times. I've traveled the
Yes, in the
country.
caste system,
And
yes.
the caste system is not your friend.
No.
And these ideas are inherent to see people in very mean terms. So this is part of the Hindus as well. They've got their own problems. And I just want to show one more thing here, how racial groups rate each other. Now, for instance, white respondents, right? How they look at themselves versus others. You'll
Yeah,
notice that white
terrible.
people have a very fair view of everyone else. They look at everyone else equally. Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, they see them all on a continuum. We're all equal because
Yeah,
white people,
yeah.
white culture believes that everyone's equal. Let's have a look at Hispanics. Okay. They don't like white people. You see, they like Hispanics a whole lot, but they don't like them white people, and they like black people more than they like white people. Then black people and Asians are on the same. You see, here you've got a large disparity. So Hispanics, are they racist? The answer is, well, yes. Black respondents like white people even less, as you can tell. And they really don't like Asians, and they don't like Hispanics, but they don't like these guys over here. That's white people. So are black people racist? Oh yes, I know. I am black. I come from black culture. Believe me, the answer is yes. Asian respondents, they like themselves, and they like white people the least. So this is the scientific research. It is not popular, but ask yourself, the least racist people are white people. Which group is always demonized for being racist? White people. Who's
Well,
doing it?
there's
So,
absolutely people who are fanning discord. I mean, Canada's never been like this before. The anger, it's out and out hatred. The screaming at the Jews in the street. My goodness,
yeah,
I can hardly believe what has happened to this country. Really,
yeah.
it's insane. But I forget where I was gonna go with that. Let's have a look.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, moving
Fitna.
back to your stuff. Yeah.
Fitna. All right. So what I wanted to say is it's being cultivated. There wasn't that hatred here before. And yes, people who look like me, I used to get extra points for being female, but I don't get those anymore. So we're just down at the bottom of the totem pole. I realize that. And no, I don't see any justification for it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you look at this, I copied this because of something we said last time. Gira, okay? Pride, particularly like if we're speaking about Islam. It's admired, not humility or weakness. And the example is this man saying, if I saw a man with my wife, I would strike him with the blade of my sword. This news reached Muhammad, who then said, you're amazed at the self-respect of Ubadah, Said. He says, by Allah, I have more gira than he, and Allah has more gira than I. So while those countries you're showing, they're wandering around with the golden rule and wanting to be kind to everyone and take a rather humble attitude, okay, which is quite common, all right, has worked against them very badly because there are people who take advantage of that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I better not say what I'm thinking there. Okay, so I'll go back to one
Sorry, I
more.
do say things that are a little controversial. I tend to say these things, but someone has to say
Well,
them.
all right, I'll say it. And this is a few years ago. I saw the Pope kissing the feet of some people who were tyrants. They were leaders in Africa, but they were brutal. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, you might as well tell him to hear blue. It's like
Mhm.
they do not compute. And the people whose feet he was kissing, they're looking at each other like they have an entirely different frame of reference. It didn't make didn't make any sense. And he could do that forever and it would still not make any sense. I mean, you're not teaching anybody anything that way. It's you've got, yeah, you have a different perspective and can't expect everyone to have the same perspective. So what I wanted to show here now is another example of fitna, and that is the Muslim Brotherhood. So some of the documents that were found in the Holy Land Foundation trial, which was, partially funded by zakat we were talking about earlier, and that was to fund Hamas, all right? The Muslim Brotherhood was very involved in that, as they were in the foundation of Hamas, and saying that Palestine will be the linchpin of an Islamic renaissance, all right? So they have been working for decades towards this, and causing chaos, breakdown of the social fabric of other countries works very well towards that. So in the US, they said this themselves, I'm not making it up. The process of settlement is civilizational jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, that's the Muslim Brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, in the hands of believers, so that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. And of course, the first organization they started in the US was the Muslim Student Association. So when that's the memorandum. So when the George Floyd riots began, I immediately went to the computer and I typed in George Floyd Islam, because it made no sense. Here it was in the UK, it's all over the world suddenly, just like the Ummah. And sure enough, the Muslim Council of Britain had it on their front page, George Floyd murder and our brother. I think I might have mentioned this last time. But this is fitna, and and this is fitna. Doesn't work there. And this is fitna, okay, with Native people in Canada. And I mean, why stir up hatred like this? It's just, it makes no sense at all. Anyway, yeah. So what else have I got here? So now we move into when Islam has the upper hand. Well, I suppose, it's political.
I mean, yeah, that I disagree with some of these terms for various reasons. I just find.
Oh no, I don't. No, it's Islam needs no qualifier at all. All right. Some people like to refer to certain aspects of it as political, and certain aspects are social, and certain aspects are religious. But nevertheless, it is one entity. So here is an example from a hadith. So Ali went on a bit, and Ali was one of the companions and also his son-in-law, Muhammad's son-in-law. And they were going to Khaybar. Now, the people in Khaybar had already been routed from Medina. They used to live in Medina, okay? They were a successful tribe in Medina, Jewish tribe. Well, they had been forced to leave, and here they were in Khaybar. So, why is Muhammad going after them in Khaybar now, So, but he did, and he wanted to attack. And Ali went a bit and said, he looked around and said in a loud voice, on what issue should I fight with the people? What's the excuse to fight with the people? So Muhammad said, fight with them until they bear testimony to the fact there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. And when they do that, their blood and riches are inviolable from your hands, but what is justified by law. So this is defensive jihad. So somehow Islam, their jihad is always defensive, all right, because they are not accepting Islam. And any excuse will do, basically, just like Arafat said. So here's another verse from the Quran. Fight them, Allah will punish them at your hands, disgrace them, help you to victory over them. So be not weak and ask for peace while you are having the upper hand. Allah is with you. He will never decrease the reward of your good deeds. And how does that turn out? This is Sweden. This isn't Iraq. This is Sweden, okay? Exporter of jihad. Canada, burgeoning crop of jihadis. So I'll turn it back to you again.
Wow. Yeah. We've gone and just over an hour and a half. I try not to go too long usually.
I
Um,
know.
yeah, no, it's just, yeah, we can always complete this again. How many slides do you have left?
I've only got about 4 left, and why don't I just breeze through them really fast?
You don't have to breeze through them really fast. You can take some time to go through them.
Nah,
Um, yeah,
no,
it's just that
they're just
because
more because we're on the last topic here, jihad, and we're
yeah,
into stage
yeah,
3,
no,
so
it's just that
it'll just take
everything
a
that
minute.
you're saying, I mean, without me diving deep into the Sharia or other sources, but all of this is corroborated by the legal sources. All of it's corroborated by multiple other sources within Islam. So yeah, I think hopefully the audience is learning and seeing that there's a level of deception and there's a level of hidden intention, and what you see is not always what you see on the surface is not always what's happening at depth. And we need to be
So
aware of this fact that they are
yeah,
using our goodwill, they're abusing our good nature, our acceptance, our tolerance against us. And this is actually part of the Muslim Brotherhood strategy. It's part of their written intention, plan that was written something like 3 decades ago to do exactly that. And I think we've forgotten as Westerners that we have enemies, that there are such things as enemies, that there is such a thing as evil. In our rush to embrace other cultures and to see the good and the value in people, we've perhaps lost sight of the fact that there is evil in people, that there are people
yeah,
that
and
do
maybe we're
hate
not
us.
so bad. Like we got to
Yeah.
stop teaching that in schools. Like we're not so bad, for heaven's sakes. So I just wanted to show this. Thousands of Christians were deliberately targeted and killed in Nigeria. And this is jihadis. They keep changing the names. This is obfuscation. There's no reason to have 20 names. They're all jihadis. All right. So to be specific, it says here last year alone, 4,998 Christians killed because of their faith in Nigeria. And the people doing it were shouting, Allahu Akbar, we will destroy all Christians. This is a mass funeral. They have many mass funerals. This is criminal. I mean, obviously, this is criminal. Why is this not in our news? Why is this not in our news? Why is what's happening in Bangladesh not in our news? You know, instead, why are politicians wandering around wearing green squares when it is very
Mhm.
clear that many of the people who have come here for safety as genuine refugees are terrified when they see the Royal Canadian Mounted Police giving the call to prayer for Adhan at Ramadan time and posting it on the police website, showing how
This is
multicultural they are.
this is part of, and they won't say Merry Christmas because that's been outlawed now. It's Happy
Exactly.
Holidays. Like,
Exactly. So
yeah.
anyway, so that's Nigeria,
Oh,
and I'll
sorry,
mention
I'm
booty.
not showing the slides. My bad. I just realized I my apologies.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Well,
this is a genocide. I mean, Nigeria is a genocide. It's a Christian genocide,
it is a
and
Christian
there is a
genocide.
targeted, deliberate
Absolutely.
genocide against Christians in the world today.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Amongst a few. Okay. And this is booty. Okay. So I just went to the Quran, the early biography of Muhammad that I showed you at the beginning by Ibn Ishaq, and one group of hadith, the Bukhari hadith. And I put in only 2 terms, booty and spoils of war. It was just a little fun exercise because, like I said, the whole chapter 8 of the Quran is called the spoils of war. So how often do they talk? 425 references to it. And I can tell you that when these poor people in Nigeria are killed,
Hmm.
there's a lot of booty taken. There's a lot of booty in terms of children as well, females.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is indistinguishable from piracy.
sorry, this is indistinguishable from what?
Piracy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. You know, I mean, but jihad has the high road in the doctrine. This is how you get to paradise if one of them's killed by accident. So what does Quran say? And fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but not do not transgress the limits. So, you know, but there is a footnote. Now, I have this Quran here. Can you see it? All right, it's a wonderful one because it has lots of commentary from Al-Tabari, Ibn Kathir, Bukhari, etc. Very good references. So the footnote in this to the Quran here, it says that jihad in Allah's cause, okay, this is for Islam, with full force of numbers and weaponry, is given the utmost importance in Islam and is one of the pillars on which it stands. By jihad, Islam is established. Allah's word is made superior. Without jihad, it could never have spread like it did. No possibility. That was done through conquest. So by abandoning jihad, Islam is destroyed. Jihad is an obligatory duty in Islam on every Muslim, and it's in my book right here. This is like a new book, fairly new, 1996 edition. And let me see. I think I've got, this is probably the last one here. Now I borrowed this from CSPII. They have this lovely chart on their website. And it shows the breakdown, statistical breakdown. If you do, an analysis of the doctrine like I did there, it's not hard. You'll find that in the Sirah of Muhammad, the one by Ibn Ishaq here, okay, 67% of it is about jihad. Reading this book is a nightmare. It is a horror show. It is just blood from one end to the other. Okay, so 67%. Now, in the Meccan Quran, there was no actual violence. There was intolerance. Ancestors were cursed, but there was no actual violence. That didn't happen till Muhammad got to Medina and discovered that the Jews were not going to accept him as prophet. So then everything changed. And the jihad began, robbing the caravans that were going to Mecca. He was mad at Mecca. They needed to have a living. They weren't farmers, so they started robbing caravans. And in the Hadith, Bukhari Hadith, 21%. So the total is 31% of primary doctrine and context is about significant. Jihad is crucial to Islam. So there we are.
It's mandatory. The caliph has to do jihad at least twice a year.
So yeah, I've said enough. And oh my goodness, we've done it again.
Yeah, no, it's gone. The time flew. I just try to keep things. Typically, I do my own streams like an hour and a quarter. That works well for me. And then look, sometimes it's interesting, but that was very interesting. That was actually very interesting to cover these things at a pace and in a way that is not heavily doctrinal, but also shows practical examples of the encroachment on the method.
Yeah, because people can't understand the doctrine. It's what they need to know is that there is a connection, a direct connection between the doctrine. It's repeated throughout history, over and over for 14 centuries. Nobody has to sit down and say, these are the phases, those are the phases. They're repeated throughout history over and over and over again. So what they need to know is what they've got's not so bad. Stop criticizing ourselves for everything and start protecting what we've got, because the alternative is not an option.
Yeah, I mean, people need to realize some religions are evil. The fact that it's a religion doesn't necessarily make it good.
Well, it's much more than a religion, as Lloyd. So,
and if you look at the Aztec
it's
religion,
complete civilizational system.
And if you look at the Aztec religion, I mean, they would kill up to 8,000 people in one day at one of their ceremonies by laying people down, captured slaves, captured warriors, captured people, boys, girls, women, men, whatever, lay them on the altar and cut them open and take out the heart and sometimes eat it. Up to 8,000 in one day. That was religion. This
one has Sharia finance, so look out.
Yeah.
It's got tools nobody else had.
Yeah, and we don't respect that. We don't turn around and say, well, we have to respect that because it's culture. It's brown people. You can't be racist by saying something bad about.
That's the governance angle. It's socioeconomic. It's like
no,
it's everything.
I have, because basically, you've got these people going, well, we have standards, and if you don't like them, we have others. No, we have standards. We don't compromise. That's evil. That's wrong. We do not allow that here. We do not tolerate that here. And it's simple. At some point, we need to put our foot down. We need to say, we are right, you are wrong. That's it. Goodbye. And
well, that's not what they're teaching in the schools, though. They're teaching that we're terrible. They're teaching our societies are terrible. The evidence does not bear that out, like the map that you were showing there about which are the most tolerant societies. Those are the ones everybody wants to go to, right? Yeah. There's a reason for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, these people hate the good, and there's objective good. They don't believe in objective good. But you need to be proud. If you're a Westerner, if you're a Christian, be proud. Yeah. Understand the value that Christianity and Western culture has brought to the world. Yeah. Understand the benefit, how it has uplifted the world. And don't let them try to tell you otherwise.
Yes.
So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Asylum. Yes, and people came here for asylum to escape, tyrannical regimes and belief systems. They came here for that, and they are scared. I know people who came here for safety, and when they see the bridge lit up green, Muhammad's favorite color, to celebrate Ramadan, they are scared. They see the Islamization happening that, politicians with a 4-year term turn a blind eye to. Islam doesn't have that handicap. It just keeps thinking ahead. Whereas politicians tend to think in terms of 4 years, and that is not working for us.
As they would say in the Middle East, or rather say in Pakistan, Afghanistan, we measure time with a wristwatch. They measure by the calendar.
Yeah, a long calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, very long calendar.
We need to stop being so short-sighted. Yeah. Don't take the money from for the universities. Don't take it. Stop it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's up to us. I mean, the governments are failing us, but things are changing, things are shifting. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I know I've said a few things that are perhaps controversial or perhaps very blunt, but
if I could just say, if there's anybody here who's connected to me on LinkedIn, this one is going to be posted. So was the last one. The last one was taken down. This one might be taken down. If it is, I think you get 3 strikes and you're gone. Now, I don't know how to use X. I'm really bad at it, and I don't like it much because you can't say as much as I need to say.
No, with X, you can write long form articles. They've changed the whole platform. The whole interface is different. You could write a book on that thing now.
I could? All right, You tell me how to do that, because that may be my next place. I'll move to X because there's freedom of speech there. And everything I say for good. I have absolutely no hatred towards anyone, and that I want people to be safe and enjoy their life. And I want little boys to be able to play music, and I want girls to be able to sing.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do make a distinction between ideologies like Islam and Muslims as people. However, those people they try to conflate the two as one thing. Yeah. And say that if you don't like Islam, you hate these people or that person, which is absolutely untrue. And then also, you're racist because you don't like Islam. Islam is a thing, an ideology. It's not a race. There are black Muslims, there are white Muslims, there are gingers in Chechnya. Yeah. So but I don't know. So they will play all sorts of games.
But at the same time, I just have to say you can't divorce the two either, because, for instance, the fellow who wrote about Islamophobia and said Islamists are using this, and everybody goes, well, he's wonderful. That's great. This is what Islam should be. That is not what Islam is. Islam is an entity. It is an entity that includes jihad very much. It cannot be divorced. It cannot be changed. There's no way. They cannot remove the jihad. No. They can't take the hadith out of Islam. It's impossible.
No, it's tribal, and it's tribal. That's what it is. It's Arab supremacism. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Elaine.
And thank you. We better give listeners a break now.
No, thank you to the audience and guys. Yeah, thank you for all the interesting comments. Thanks for the participation, for the nearly 100 of you. I will be back on Friday. I'm talking with someone from the UK known as the Patriotic Christian. As you know, things are pretty bad in the UK, and this is someone who's trying to make a difference with these organizing events, rallies, free speech events, and the UK is. Well, I think we're all watching the UK right now. Yeah. Also, I've got a stream on Friday, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and one on Monday. Whoa. So, and then and then I have to go away for a week. I'll be out of the country for a week, and I come back, and I've got a number of. So I think I've got about 8 different streams already pre-planned. And someone mentioned the Armenian genocide. was supposed to do this month a talk with a professor who's written the book on the Armenian genocide. I will try and get him on for next month because I've also got a lot going on. So hopefully I can have this guy as one of these, perhaps the premier scholar today on the Armenian genocide. I think that'll be a fantastic discussion.
That would be,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I have a lot planned. Just check the list. And yeah, thank you very much, Elaine. We'll chat again. We'll chat soon again. And thanks to the audience. And please, guys, if you like this, please like, share, subscribe,
Oh
follow me
yeah.
on it.
And there's a link below. Have a
All
look
links.
at my book. Yes, you can. There's a sample there. You can see what's in it. It's very easy to read and understand. You know, maybe get one for your favorite or least favorite politician. This is,
Yeah. So
I've
guys,
sent a
all her
lot to
links.
politicians
Yeah, all her
just so
links are
they
in the chat.
understand the basics. Sorry.
No, understood. We have to do something. I mean, talk to your school board, talk to whatever.
Yeah.
We've got to work at the grassroots level, and all her links are in the description. And if you guys would like to support the channel, that's there too. Much appreciated. Thank you very much, and I will see you guys on Friday evening.
Thanks
Take care, guys.
again. Bye,
Thanks all.
Lloyd.